Good morning, guys, and welcome to Nigerian Nerds review of the Mortal Kombat 2021 movie, which just released on HBO Max on the 23rd of April, aka yesterday. Right off the bat, I'm going to establish some ground rules. First ground rule being something called suspension of expectations. What does this mean? When you walk into certain movies, right, you have a certain mindset that you need to be in to appreciate what the director is offering you. For instance, I'll give you an example. Fast and Furious. You don't go into a Fast and Furious movie because you're expecting Vin Diesel's award-winning acting skills to be on display. You just don't do that. Similar to a movie like Godzilla vs. Kong, you don't go into that movie because you're expecting some heavy emotional stakes and to see the next great thing in cinematic storytelling. You just don't. You switch off your brain, expect mindless action, you get rewarded for it, and you leave the cinema happy. That is what suspension of expectations is. So bear with me as I move forward through this review. We aren't going to be focusing on pacing, we're not going to be focusing on the acting, we're not going to be focusing on any of the intricate details that go into making a holistic cinematic project. We're just not going to do that because movies like this, movies like Mortal Kombat, operate on a different set of rules. So what are the strengths of this movie? The strengths of this movie, number one, is in the characters. But that's a double-edged sword because the weakness of this movie is also the characters. But let's focus on the strengths. Strength number one, Sub-Zero. Oh my god. Sub-Zero was used to showcase the true fantastical elements of what the Mortal Kombat universe is capable of. Each time he felt he was on screen, I felt his presence. From the first time to the last time, it was engaging. Seeing him use ice in all the most extraordinary and creative ways imaginable, that sold me. Second, Scorpion. I mean, you can't have a Mortal Kombat movie or a Mortal Kombat video game without Scorpion. Scorpion is the Ryu of the Mortal Kombat franchise, which is always strange to me because you would expect that maybe Liu Kang should be the Ryu equivalent of the Mortal Kombat universe, but no. Scorpion always takes the glory just because of how edgy he is, just because of how engaging his story is, and it was no different in the movie. The guy who played Scorpion had this intensity. He always has it in every movie that he's in. And that intensity, it shone forth. Like the moment you saw him on the screen for the first time, you were pleased. They were the ones that carried this movie on their backs for me. The next person has to be Kano. My biggest critique of this movie, as I will highlight a bit further down the line, is with regards to how bland the supporting cast is. Like every character that is not Scorpion, Sub-Zero, or Kano, they were just meh, like bleh. Like you couldn't appreciate them for anything. They weren't really bringing anything. There's a guy I follow on YouTube. He critiques cinematic projects, and his name is Filmento. Filmento approaches cinematic storytelling. For it to make sense, you have to have three goals, and it's SGU. So the first one is stakes. So there has to be something at stake. The second is goals. So you have to, your main character, your main plot, there has to be an overarching goal that they are working towards. And U, which is urgency. Urgency means how, if this isn't done within X amount of time, what is going to go wrong? So SGU. No, all the characters in this movie didn't, if they had stakes, they didn't have goals. If they had goals, they didn't have any urgency to them. They were just, and then they were all portrayed rather blandly. But that's okay. Remember, we said suspension of expectations, so that's fine. Kano, Sub-Zero, Scorpion. Biggest strengths of this movie, by a margin. Next would be the world building. Those little hints that you saw of Outworld in this movie, of the other realms, of the past Mortal Kombat tournaments, those little bits of exposition, they did such an amazing job of making you want to know more. You wanted to find out who won in the past, who lost in the past, why are we where we are, what's the origin of the dragon symbol. They gave you something to look forward to. I liked that. And of course, the biggest final and maybe the biggest strength of this film is the cinematography and the fight choreography. Oh crap. They weren't all excellent, but Jesus Christ, man, like some of the stuff that they did, I can't hit on the relevance of Sub-Zero in this movie enough. but every time Sub-Zero fought, I was satisfied. And in particular, I was really impressed with something they did in the first fight scene that you saw. Well, after the second fight scene that you saw, which was an MMA fight, and they actually employed real MMA techniques there. There was an armbar. The armbar was reversed into a reverse crucifix, and they were throwing leg kicks. There was genuine technique in what they were doing. One of the downfalls of being a fighter, right, is that when you see cinematography in movies, it loses its relevance, it loses its pop, because you can see how fake most mainstream Hollywood cinematography or fight choreography is. It's just poorly done. A fight would never go that way. But every so often, somebody does something right. And the first MMA bout in this movie, they did a really good job. Like I was blown away. Like not blown away, but I was drawn in because they put an actual effort into making it look like what an actual fight would be like, not the usual clean Hollywood Matrix style. Shout out to Matrix, by the way. Okay, so yeah, cinematography was great. Fight choreography was amazing. Characters were beautiful, specifically Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and Kano. I love Kano through this movie. Kano actually carried the entire plot for me when Sub-Zero and Scorpion were not on screen. Now let's talk about the weakness of this movie. Biggest weakness of this movie had to be the characters. Specifically, every supporting character that was not Sub-Zero, Scorpion, or Kano. I couldn't wait for them to get off the screen because they had no stakes, they had no goals, they had no urgency to them, and they were all portrayed. They weren't the best or the most expressive actors portraying these characters. But that's not what you're looking for with these movies. You just want action. So if I was to be extra, I would say, man, yeah, maybe they should have just made it a standalone Scorpion Sub-Zero movie, like, and left the rest of the guys out. But the other characters didn't really give me much. Liu Kang was meh. Kung Lao was and it shone forth in other parts of the film because they did some cheesy stuff, but it was because of they needed to cram in as many Easter eggs into the movie as possible. So there was a really good Easter egg where somebody says, "Oh, you beat Eddie Tobias," and if you know anything about the history of Mortal Kombat, you know that the first Mortal Kombat was made by John Tobias and Ed Boon. So that was good. But then you now have other stuff, like when a character does something, he says flawless victory, or you see somebody do something and he says fatality, and you're just like, did you really need to do that? Like, that's kind of taking me away from what is happening right now. I kind of want to focus on the action, and this, you wouldn't kill somebody in real life and say fatality. But remember, we're operating under special rules here, suspension of expectations. So that was a bit hard for me to swallow. So all in all, guys, I think I would give Mortal Kombat 2021 a 7.5 out of 10. It was a solid watch, and it took me all the way back to my childhood. I definitely recommend it, and make sure you see it before anybody drops any spoilers. So as usual, like, share, subscribe. Please subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and I'll see you guys at the next video.